people I would have trouble with later, but an executive trustee of that first parliament, whom I knew pretty well, plus his soul, he's passed since then, basically gave me a very big information. He says, pagans shouldn't really be here. And I go, what do you mean? He says, you don't even make up the numbers for the UN for a minor religion. Huh? That's 100,000 people. And I go, we reach 100,000 people. No. You're a bunch of groups of 10s and 20s and 30s and maybe 100 here and 100 there. But you're not 100,000. Show me your central registry. Huh? Really? And he says, yeah, that's how you get recognized. I mean, you can make all the claims you want, and we're being over backward, but it's a privilege to be here at the Parliament. That branded me. That seared me to my soul. I received a flyer, a trifold, talking about the problem of world religions, and it struck me at the right time in the right place. I wrote to them, I gave them a small donation, and they asked, for help, and I said, okay, I can help. And I went down and started volunteering for the office. I was the first pagan to actually volunteer in the office.
Now, I first heard about the problem of the world's religions as a modern occurrence in 1991. When Sir Ed Hubbard brought by a flyer for the Parliament because he was involved as a volunteer in the Parliament offices. And for the intervening period of several years before the Parliament actually happened in 1993, the second convening, I regularly heard about it from Edward. Edward was very excited about the Parliament, very excited about what was happening, and in fact, it was an exciting thing. I mean, think about it. Leadership of most of the world's religions coming together in one place to talk. How often does that happen? The answer at that time was once every 100 years, because that was the only other time something quite comparable had happened.
You were talking about like the pagan community, the emergent Wiccan community. They didn't believe in anything like that would happen. And also I was working a regular job, so they didn't believe it was going to happen either. A lot of people involved didn't believe in it, didn't think about it, even disdained it. And then it wasn't until like a couple of weeks before it when it started hitting the newspapers that it was like really, really good. And then people started really reacting to it. And then by the ritual, everybody had been convinced that they were involved with it. But I was still there. There was a big ritual held in Lincoln Park, in the park right there, Almost Grant Park, led by Phyllis Crott, and she brought in most of the leadership into doing it. But they had to go to the Cardinal himself to get the permit. It was a real battle, and the Cardinal went to the mayor, and the mayor finally let it get through. But because it was pagan, it wasn't really allowed. I mean, the Greek Orthodox had already walked off because of Greek, several of that. Lady of the Living had already gotten death threats at parts of it, and she vowed never to return again, which would have had a big emphasis on what I would do later. It would be a very important moment. I was there. I actually stood on stage when the Pakistani Indians got into a big fight, and they thought they might be throwing punches or more. That first parliament had 3 elements to it. You had a big fight between India and Pakistan, and that manifested all over the streets. There was 6,000 people in a building called the Palmer House, and it was crammed from end to end. Agreement wasn't there. coordinality, and it was really about this idea of the global ethics, the 4 ideas of how we're going to build a framework to conversate. But no, the Greek Orthodox, everything, there was a big thing. Oh yeah. It was not in any way the harmony fest that you would see later to come. It was raucous. It was important. Now they had something very different that's now been eliminated, but they had delegates. In the first parliaments, they had delegates. They had the 8 great speakers, which Lady Olivia of the Fellowship of Isis stood. She was one of the first great speakers. She was the first 8, kind of like, if you had the hand, these are the 8 fingers, that sort of idea. And we were represented through her. Then you had Phyllis Groton, you had these delegates sitting in what they would call a delegation. And this delegation would continue on into other parliaments. Today it no longer exists. It's been quite eliminated. But back then, so it was the idea that we were all participants, but there was this deeper group of people in 93 working it. So your voice of the parliament was a very interesting side. I talked about delegates, and there was this official body. We were sitting in plenaries for days. It was one of the more excruciating parts. But during the middle of the day, they had something called the Parliament of the People. And that was the idea that we were talking together. We were in these big groups, and we were talking about big ideas and big things that we're sending up. And the internet was relatively new there. It was just really beginning. The idea of the World Wide Web in 1993 had just broken. And we were using forums, something called Earthlink. You heard of Earthlink? It's become a big system now. They were there kind of showing people how to use the religious forums and such. But what we had was a very basic idea called Your Voice. And it was a box all around, and you would put your comments into it. And somebody would type it, and you'd add a few dollars to it, or $1, $2, or $3 to get them printed. And these kids, off-site, this was an unofficial parliament project. They would then type all of these together, and you had these papers coming out, these little newsletters coming out, every couple of hours about your voice. And it was this sort of internal communication system that was happening while we were all suffering through the major plenaries. And now as assistant stage manager, one of the rewards for working in the office is they gave me a pretty high-end position. And what I was supposed to do, because I actually knew their names from all the years of working in the office, was the various officials from the green room, off stage, and I would stage them, and then the stage manager would send them on. Exciting adventure, got me to see really front line. And one of the things was that we were not allowed to wear our religious jewelry in the first parliament. Everybody else could. We were staff. We were not supposed. I was not allowed to or show it, and so I didn't. But your voice was then this represented this voice, and people would try to sweep them off the tables. A lot, it was kind of annoying towards the end, and I was the only person I know of that grabbed all of them. And then Brendan Tripp of Edgetown Publications, the first book of his thing, created Your Voice, the book. And it is all of these words of this Parliament of the People, the first real voiceover. And they never repeated it. This would be an event that was never ever repeated again. It is so Your Voice is an artifact of that first Parliament. Since then, they've eliminated both the delegation system, and they never had another Parliament of the People again. It's everything I've done. Yeah. At this point, it's everything I've ever done since then. Because the other venture that branded me would be by Lady Olivia herself. And there was this wonderful photograph. I've got to find it again. But it was all the leadership of basically a pagandom, and she was being very selective. And then at the last minute, she dragged me in. And the power of suggestion, the power of naming, they took this picture. It's in one of the Circle magazines. And everybody asked, who is this young man in this picture of these national leaders? Oh, because he's there, he has to be a new national leader. Because why would he be there? Power of naming. Don and other people talk about this idea of being in the picture. And right then and there, I was branded a national leader. What would happen next to me would be an entire lifetime, but it would be that journey of the Parliament. I would never back away from the Parliament. And that is the idea of it, So that would lead me to 99, where then and through the people who've heard me mention the witch school idea. But I came out of there. I originally was going to build, it wasn't originally witch school, it was originally the interfaith school. I wanted to build a school for the Parliament. but literally nobody believed into me. So I then stepped it down to make a witch school for that, and the Daily Spell was growing. So I stepped it down. It still took me from 2000 to September 4th, 2001 to get any form of idea of religious education online. It was a real battle, but that 99 Parliament really showed me that we needed to have that interfaith side.
And I've attended Parliament since 2009 in Melbourne, Australia. And for that Parliament, I was an ambassador for the Parliament in that year. And I have greatly enjoyed the various parliamentary experiences, friends made, experiences had. And I look forward to continuing to be part of that and bringing the pagan community's presence into Parliament, I think, is important. That's why I've chosen to be part of it. And now I'm with my affiliation with Circle Sanctuary. I'm been part of the Circle Sanctuary delegation to Parliament, each of the last several ones, and certainly appreciate the contributions Selena Fox and Circle have also given toward the parliamentary movement.
My personal journey began because I was working in interfaith in Oregon. I had moved from California to Oregon, where I now reside. And there was somebody who was involved quite a lot with the Parliament of World Religions, that I was one of my interfaith people. And they encouraged me to go. And I wasn't planning on going, but they said, Andrea, you've got to go. And they were kind enough at the time, this was in Utah, to actually get me a ticket from somebody who had signed up early but could no longer be there. So that worked out wonderfully. And once I went, I was absolutely hooked. And I and my husband had a conversation, and we decided that given my interest and how important the Parliament was, that whenever I was going to be traveling, if it was for vacation, we would, and if the Parliament was going on, I was going to be there. So that's pretty much my beginning story there.
Parliament came across my radar along with all of the other religious things that would flow through my social media in 2017. So I signed up then, and what I decided was what I had done in business is I build networks. I build technical networks, but I also build networks of people. So I went through my LinkedIn, I went through all of my other magical, occult, esoteric contacts and started reaching out to people. And your name came up. And that's how we met. We started chatting online probably around late 2017, 2018. And I met probably 20 or 30 people and started chatting with them very heavily. So by the time, my goal was by the time that I got to Parliament, we'd have some pre-made conversations and things that we wanted to discuss, like the Pagan Credit Union project and some of the other things that we're trying to do in the larger world, especially around outreach.
Oh man, Parliament it's really powerful because there's all these other religions there, and you get to experience all of these different belief systems. It's not just pagans and Christianity and a couple of Jewish people. There's all these other religions, and they're all there sharing and giving of themselves, and you get to go to Langar, which is a beautiful ritual. There's all of these very sacred ways of sharing religion without anybody being judgy. It's very open, very loving. I really like it. The first time I went, it was the women's, the focus was on women, spirituality of women. The second time I went, it was on indigenous people. And there was a Hopi elder there. It was really cool. Oh, it was super cool. And then this year it's about the rainbow, right?
No, it's defending freedom and human rights.
Okay. So in my mind, it's associated with the rainbow.
Sure, easy.
Yeah, defending human rights, because we're at such a crisis with human rights. We've got human rights issues all over the place, and all of the different religious leaders getting together and getting a cohesive focus on how we're going to move forward with dealing with that issue and shaping society. I think it's super important. Plus, I get to see other pagans there that I wouldn't normally see. There's a large Corellian contingent. We bring a large ATC contingent. We get to be together and share in being pagan together. And we love our Corellian people. So, yeah, I have a great time. And I think that everybody that could go to Parliament should, just because of the experience.
It's hard to describe the energy of Parliament unless you're there, but it's such a diverse gathering of people who are gathered for the same purpose of learning and love and togetherness, and the energy is just amazing, and you meet people in passing, and you strike up conversations, and some of the people I met at Parliament I'm still in touch with.
But I remember, as far as like the energy that was there, was really an energy of reconciliation, an energy that was, good natured, that was healing and meant to be, influential in a lot of very positive and necessary ways. The encouragement of, collaboration between religious organizations, the problem solving kind of energy that was presented by the various faiths that were represented there. And then the respect to the indigenous populations that, had their lands usurped by, the political powers that were there in Toronto at the time. I think highlighting that was also very important, and it actually meant a lot to me.
Until you get there, you really don't have any concept of the magnitude of the event. There's going to be a bunch of different faith groups represented, yada, 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 yada. But the energy that you feel on that floor is phenomenal. It is positive, it is welcoming, it is warm, it's vibratory, is exceptional. If you're sensitive, you probably need to put up some shields until you get accustomed to it. But it is a very, very welcoming experience that you probably have not had before.
My very first Parliament was at Salt Lake City. What was that, 2015?
15.
Yeah. I went because, I found out about it. I'm not really sure if it was through you guys or through Covenant of the Goddess, but I was the incoming national first officer, which basically the president of the organization, and I was sent on behalf of the organization to represent us, and it was amazing. It was really kind of life-altering experience.
You've got not just thousands of people at it, you've got people from every walk of life around the world, different faiths, and they're sharing, they're listening. I expected something just very boring. To be honest with you, boring. Much more boring. This was not. I learned a lot. I had all my fellow Corellians with me, a lot of pagans there. Not enough, but quite a bit. And the whole time we were there, we were having a good time, from everything from secular fire to the indigenous people in Canada telling us stories and showing us rituals, sitting in panels with pagans and Christians alike discussing world problems. Something I would never expect. You get this whole mindset of it's us against them, and it was nothing like that. I don't even. If you have not been, go at least one time.
The sheer size of the thing was something that really took me aback. It's just one of those things where people say, oh yeah, it's going to be so big, but you don't really understand it until you get there, and so you kind of get into it, But yeah, it was the Salt Lake City was beautiful, amazing.
And you also went to?
Yeah, I went to the one in Toronto, Canada. That was more recently. I think it was 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that one was even more impressive. But I actually, funny story there, Ed. As you very well know, that's where I met up with Patrick McCullum, and I got the distinguished honor of being his personal assistant for 3 whole days. And oh my God, was that a trip. We started really early in the morning and we stopped late at night. And today he asked me like a year later if I would be his personal assistant like forever. And I'm like, well, of course. Yes. His Excellency Reverend Sir Patrick McCullum is a priest and a world-renowned peacemaker. He is the constructor, the creator of the World Peace Violin, and he has really taken on the mantle of making peace in the world every single day that he lives. He's been doing this for like 40 or 50 years now. He is in his 70s. So, you know, he flies all over the world. He talks on the phone 24/7, 365, trying to just make the world a better place in the only way that he knows how. And that is by helping people to reconcile their differences and helping to move big projects forward. He's been a part of several large projects in his career, such as the chaplaincy in prisons for pagans. He was the orchestrator of that, and he helped to write that and get it passed into law. And you know, prison ministry has been a huge part of what he does in the past, and now he is absolutely world renowned.
I mean, Parliament in general is just like so full of, I like to say it's like full of moments, because there's the workshops that you go to where you learn, and then there's like these moments in between, but you could turn a corner and like find something completely unexpected. Like the Toronto Parliament, I walked into a room just to see what was there, and there was a group of Confucians teaching calligraphy, and I sat with them and they taught me calligraphy for about a half hour, and it was very cool. He was like a calligraphy master, and he was just like sitting there in like this little side room, and nobody else was around, and I'm not sure anybody knew he was there, but he had his little table and assistants and like traditional materials, like brushes, and it was very cool. And you know, of course, in Utah, what's memorable was the Native Americans had a fire pit outside, where were teaching people how to leave offerings, how to honor the 4 quarters of the fire, and holding sunset and sunrise rituals. So that was fantastic. That was I remember that. There was a chant that they did. I don't remember the words, but it was about water and mothers, and it was just like it hit you right here. And I think there's video of it that Lady Elizabeth took, actually, that's still floating around. But it was Parliament will like always surprise you. Always.
So the reason that I think it's important for the Aquarian Tabernacle Church to go to Parliament is because we are an international church. We have churches all over the world, and we want to share and receive like cohesive direction from the pagan community. Like, what are we all doing? What's important to us? What's important to you? What can we accomplish together? Because like governments kind of control society, but churches and religious groups shape it. They bring culture and values. And in order for us to tackle the big problems in the world today, we have to all get on the same page instead of fighting each other. So I think the Parliament of World Religions helps us all come to the table and talk about the real big issues the world faces and figure out a solution. And the Aquarian Tabernacle Church absolutely wants to be a part of that. And we've got some great ideas of how to make that happen that we want to share with others.
If you were to ask young me if pagans would be sitting with world leaders and being even listened to, I would have laughed at you. As a 16-year-old, I would look at you like you were from Mars. But yet, because of the work of the first people like yourself, so many years ago, that stepped forward, we are now a voice. And I believe, personally, we're an exceedingly important voice for the world, because I think that as pagans, we bring a much needed different way of looking at the world. And I would even say a way that is really needed now, that we don't see ourselves apart from creation, we see ourselves in relationship to it. And I think that that perspective is needed more than ever. And I'm sure that we're going to see a lot of cool things done by pagans and everybody else at the Parliament.
Yeah, I think Parliament gave me realization and permission to be out as a pagan. Because I'd always said to myself, I had one of these conversations internally of, well, as soon as I can start to retire, I can be a priest full time and I can be with the community. And what Parliament taught me was you can do both. And just like people have done for centuries, it gave me permission to talk to people of our faith, talk to people of other faiths, and really do that level of outreach. And thank you for the compliments, because that's what builds the network. So I was working in the, as venture capitalist in the blockchain and cryptocurrency space. I got 2 bills passed here in Washington State, along with others. And that gave me permission, I think, in the community and myself to be unafraid to have those conversations with business people, with legislators, and be very open about being pagan. And it's when I started to do my So You're Coming Out as a Pagan class. And and once that started, I found people were more accepting, probably because I was accepting of myself in that role in the community.
And just the whole spirit of people coming together from across the entire globe to talk together, to listen to each other, to begin some steps of mutual understanding. I think one of the earlier luminaries of the Parliament itself basically has said that there will not be peace among peoples until there's peace among religions, and peace among religions starts with communication and dialogue and connection among people with different religious faiths.
Defending freedom and human rights is an ongoing kind of thing that needs to happen, unfortunately. And so from my perspective, as someone who is an activist, who is systematically disenfranchised, having an entire parliament dedicated to that particular topic is pretty profound. And what I'm hoping is that it's a little bit more than like the lip service thoughts and prayers, and a lot more of the call to action, for the allies. So the people who are privileged, the people who do represent the majority of the ruling class in our world or in our societies, how can they actually utilize that power to increase the equity of people who are not necessarily at the receiving end of these privileges? Faith leaders and people who claim to be activists and people who claim to be do-gooders, how can we continue to do the good, continue to be active, even if there isn't a shooter, even if there isn't a problem? even if there isn't, a need that's expressed so dramatically? How can we just automatically meet needs? How do we automatically just mobilize? What can we do to kind of anticipate what our communities will need based on the signs that our environment is showing us, based on who's elected into leadership? How can we use that to analyze what situation is going to come up next and how we can mobilize, ahead of time, how we can be prepared in advance to, help the people that we're here to help, and how can we do it collaboratively, cohesively, how maybe like I myself can get past some of the barriers that people might have in collaborating with someone who is a witch or a pagan to some degree, or who is a Corellian, and ways to continue to like build those relationships so that the work of spirit can be done a lot more authentically.
I genuinely wasn't certain what to expect, and I knew that it would be an interfaith sort of event, but most of the interfaith events I've been to, most of them, but not all, that are local have been less than welcoming to pagans. They're more interested in intra-faith, which is usually things within the Christian faith, and maybe they'll include some folks that are Muslim or Jewish, but they weren't usually open to including people outside of those realms. So it was a very wonderful experience to be welcomed by so many different people from so many different countries and spiritual perspectives. So that was one thing. The enormous amount of people that were there was the other thing. Was it 10,000 or something?
Just short of that.
Yeah, and seeing all the different, just everybody was enthusiastic and welcoming and warm and curious and, generous in spirit. And the thing that I enjoyed, I think, the most was Langar with the Sikhs. It was enlightening. It was educational. It was camaraderie. There were so many wonderful things about it. But the fact that they did that every single day of the week for everybody that wanted to participate was amazing. And just getting to meet more people that, might not have had a chance to interact with other pagans and witches and stuff.
It opened me up to the fact that whereas a solitary practice back in my time, very limited groups, very limited exposure seemed to be the norm, I began to suddenly realize that I could work more and grow more by being in the community. That's what it showed me, and even today I always push myself that boundary to go further. And that's one of the things it taught me there, is that you didn't have to be limited. Nobody was limiting anybody else.
The Parliament itself was mind-blowing and fun. I think there was a highlight for me was there were 7 spiral dances in the 7 days of Parliament, that led by various different pagan folks decided to do spiral dances. Thorn Coil did a workshop, had a spiral dance. Dances of Universal, the Peace Project had let there be peace on earth, and they have peace poles that they put.
I'm often seeing that there's not much, that one person can do, but when we join together in something like the Parliament, just by showing up, you literally are making a difference. So that's a lovely thing.
My 2 major initiatives for the community, for myself, are religious identity, so people recognize and understand who we are, and cultural norming, so that it's okay to start talking about some of the concepts. And it's interesting, I'm judging an AI hackathon. For those people who aren't technical, it's, a bunch of people get together for a day and come up with business and build some technology. And the sponsors turned around and asked me, "Are you pagan? I've heard that you're pagan." So that to me is cultural norming. At least it's a start of having the conversation that doesn't have a visceral reaction.
Gosh, Parliament has been so many wonderful memories in both of them, and they were each very unique in their own way. Within Parliament itself, I think some of the keynote speakers have been very enlightening and enjoyable. So those have been some of my favorites, but the closing ceremony in Salt Lake was also very moving.
A very exciting and very enlightening experience, not just because we had part of our community there that we were comfortable with, but the community of other faith groups that were there were exceptional and inquisitive and supportive and non-judgmental and all those positive things that we always look for.
I like to feel that those people who attend the Parliament will bring that feeling back and extend it. I have noticed that every time the Parliament happens in a given city, there is a massive religious revival there, including in the local pagan community. In Chicago, the pagan community was totally revitalized in 1993. There are events going on to this day, such as the annual Icean Goddess Conference, which began because of that Parliament energy and have never stopped. It is an energy to bring forward with you after the Parliament. It's not just something to enjoy while it's there. It's something to bring back to the world. And that's why the Parliament is so important. Because what happens at Parliament doesn't stop at Parliament. It goes back with all people who attend it, most of whom are community leaders in their own countries and communities. And the positive relationships they're able to make, the good impressions that are created, they take back to where they come from. They take back to their congregations, their temples, their communities, and share with them. And this influences public opinion, it influences law. And we all know that there are negative groups lobbying in many countries around the world for repressive religious laws. But at the Parliament, positive connections are made that can counter these. When people go home from Parliament, they take that positive message that when someone tries to say, oh, you should hate this group or you should hate that group, they can say, but I met these people at Parliament. They're not like that at all. I saw their presentation. This is not at all who they were. This is, I think, the real strength of Parliament and the real power of Parliament.
And then when you come down to this one, lots of reasons to go. It's transformational. It changed not just me, but it changed my tradition. It changed everything I've ever been. I mean, for me, there is no question. This is a long past 30th anniversary. And the answer that it comes to is when I go down there, right, do we have a right to stand there? And the answer is, we bought our tickets. What are you going to say now? We're going to stand there in that diversity. And when that goes to that executive, ask us what our rights are. It all started right there.
Welcome to the 2020 Parliament of the Lord's Religion, celebrating 150 years of the Parliament in Chicago. Please welcome Potawatomi representatives and elders.